The hand closed around Angel Johnson's wrist before she understood she was moving. 1 second, she stood in the dark at the edge of the stage, behind the cable runs, behind the men with headsets, watching 40 million people watch somebody else. The next second, she was in the light. The floor changed under her heels, carpet to lacquer, and the roar hit her like weather. Kang Joon-ho did not look at her. He looked out at the room, at the tears of screaming, at the wall of lenses, and he lifted their joined hands so every camera in the building could find them. "This is my wife." The sound that came back was not applause. It was something older than applause, a noise a crowd makes when it stops being a crowd. Somewhere in the third tier, a girl began to sob into a microphone she did not know was live. Camera 2 swung so fast its operator lost the frame and found it again on Angel's face, and 40 million people learned her cheekbones in the same instant. Flash, flash, flash. She kept her chin level. She had been photographed at her worst by better men than these. Joon-ho leaned in. To the room it was tenderness, a husband saying something private to a woman he adored, and 11,000 phones went up to catch it. His mouth came close to her ear. His hand did not shake. "Don't fall for me." Angel smiled for the cameras. She did not look at him. "I wasn't planning to. If you are already sitting forward, do me a favor and hit subscribe, then tell me in the comments whether you would have said yes to him. Hold that thought. You will need it later." 12 hours earlier, Angel Johnson walked into Seoul like a woman walking back into a house that had burned down with her inside it. She did not tell anyone that. She wore ivory. She took the stairs. At 9:15 a.m., she sat at the head of a table in a glass room 40 floors above Gangnam and let 11 executives from Harrow Entertainment discover, one by one, that she had read their financials more carefully than they had. "Your global fandom is 62% non-Korean," she said. "You are speaking to them in Korean and hoping. My platform ends the hoping." Chorus carries one voice into 40 languages at the same second, with tone intact. Not subtitles, meaning. The oldest man at the table smiled the way men smile when they intend to be charming about a number. "Miss Johnson, we have an internal translation team. You have 9 people and a spreadsheet." Angel did not raise her voice. "Last March your artist apologized for something he did not do because your team rendered a joke as an admission. It trended in 6 countries. It cost you a Japanese tour." She let it sit exactly long enough. "I am not selling you software. I am selling you the last quiet night of sleep you are ever going to get." The room laughed because there was nothing else to do. She won it in 90 minutes. She always won these. That was the part nobody believed about her, and the part that had nearly killed her. Afterward, in the corridor, she was checking her phone when a voice behind her said, "You changed the ending." Angel did not turn. The ending was bad. The ending was mine. That is why it was bad. Kang Joon-ho came up beside her with his hands in his pockets and no security in sight, which meant he had lost them on purpose, which meant he had been waiting. "You were supposed to say it was fine," he said. "You were supposed to write something that was." He was the most photographed man alive. In person, he was smaller than the posters and quieter than the noise, and he had the specific stillness of a person who has spent his whole life being looked at and has decided not to give them anything extra. They had not seen each other in 4 months. Neither of them said hello. They had not said hello in 6 years. "Your mother called me," he said. Angel finally turned. "My mother does not have your number." "Your mother has everyone's number." "What did she want?" "She wanted to know why you sound tired on the phone. She wanted to know if you are eating." He paused. She asked if I was eating. "What did you say?" "I lied to her." "Good," Angel said. "She hates a coward." He almost laughed, and then something went across his face that she caught because she had spent 6 years learning his face. It was gone in less than a second. He straightened. He was Kang Joon-ho again, the smooth blank of him, and she watched him put it on like a coat. "Congratulations on the deal," he said. "Joon-ho, I have a thing. He walked away, and Angel Johnson stood in a corridor in Seoul with her phone in her hand and the strangest feeling in her chest, which was the feeling of a door closing very gently in her face for the first time in 6 years. The thing was a board meeting. It ran at 11 a.m. on the 14th floor, and Joon-ho was not invited to it, which was the first fact, and director Baek Sung-min had already distributed the photographs, which was the second. They were nothing. A parking garage, a woman's silhouette, a car door, a man who might have been Joon-ho, and, in 2 of the frames, definitely was. Our position, Baek said pleasantly, is that we have protected him for 11 years. Our position is that a man who cannot be protected must be released. The brand is not one person. The brand, said someone at the far end, is entirely one person. Then the brand is fragile, Baek said, and we should say so out loud before the market does. He had counted the votes before he walked in. Men like Baek always had. By 11:40 a.m. it was decided. An emergency press conference on Friday, a statement of mutual respect, and Kang Joon-ho would be removed from Eclipse for conduct damaging to the group. Baek gathered his papers, and something in his chest felt close to joy, and he did not entirely bother to hide it. He had waited a long time for this. He had a file. He had been keeping it for 6 years. Joon-ho heard at 12:10 p.m., standing in a rehearsal room with a towel around his neck, and did not react at all, which frightened his manager more than screaming would have. He went to the archive that night. Chairman Cheon had been dead for 2 years. He had found Joon-ho at 14 singing badly in a competition in a city nobody drove to, and he had put him in a van, and he had signed the papers himself instead of sending a lawyer. He was the only man in the industry who had ever believed out loud that an idol should be permitted a life. It had made him a joke at conferences. The original contract was in a box on the 4th shelf. Joon-ho sat on the floor of a room that smelled of paper and read it by phone light until 3 a.m., and at 3:14 a.m. he found it in Claw's language, in the old man's own stubborn wording, buried under a decade of amendments nobody had bothered to strip out. The company could terminate for dating. The company could not touch family. Joon-ho sat very still on the floor of the archive with the box open on his knees. A girlfriend was a scandal. You could fire a man for a scandal. A wife was a headline. A wife was 40 million people and a hashtag and a market response. And Baek could no more fire him for a wife than he could fire the weather. He needed to be married by Friday. He knew exactly one person on earth who could not be bought, could not be leaked, and would not flinch in front of a camera. He had spent 6 years making sure he would never, ever ask her for anything. He went anyway. Angel opened her hotel door at 11:40 p.m. in a headscarf and reading glasses and looked at him for 3 full seconds. No, she said. You don't know what it is. You came here at midnight without your hat. Whatever it is, no. She stood back to let him in anyway. He told her all of it, standing up in the middle of the room, with none of the softening. He was not good at asking, having never done it, so he simply laid it out like a man emptying his pockets onto a table. Baek, the photographs, the vote, Friday, the clause, the old man's handwriting, the word family, the 6 days. Then he stopped talking. Angel took off her glasses. Say the sentence, Joon-ho. Angel, you came here to ask me something. Ask it with your mouth. He looked at the carpet. Then he looked up, and he said it plainly, which was the only cruelty he was capable of. Marry me on Friday, in front of everyone, so they cannot take it from me. The room was very quiet. No, Angel said. He nodded once, immediately as though he had known. You want to know why, she said. Or do you already know why? I know why. Say it then. If we are saying things with our mouths tonight, because of him. Because of him, Angel agreed. Her voice did not rise. That was the terrible part. I was in this country for 2 years, Joon-ho. I was 25, and I was in love, and I built something with a man who told me every morning that he loved my mind. And when he wanted the company, he did not fight me for it, because he could not win that fight. So he went on television instead and explained, very gently, very reasonably, in perfect Korean, that I was unwell. I know. He did not say I was stupid. He was too smart for that. He said I was fragile. He said the pressure had gotten to me, and he was worried about me, and he hoped I would get help. She smiled, and it was awful. Do you understand what that does? You cannot defend yourself against fragile. Every word out of your mouth is evidence. If you are calm, you are cold. If you are angry, he was right. Joon-ho did not move. They put my face on the news in this city, she said. In this city. And then they put it on the news in mine. And there is not a single room I have walked into in 4 years where somebody in it does not already know a story about me that a man wrote. Angel. So no, not because I do not love you. Because I do. She put her glasses back on, which was how he knew she was finished. I will not stand in front of 40 million people beside a famous man ever again as long as I live. There was nothing to say to that. He knew it. He had known it in the archive at 3:14 a.m. Okay, Joon-ho said. He said it the way a man says it when he means it. No second ask. No leaning. No pressure. And no guilt. And no clever thing held back for the door. He stood up and he found his jacket, and at the threshold he turned around. And Angel braced because this was where they always tried again. Thank you for saying no to my face, he said. Nobody does that. And he left. Angel Johnson stood in the middle of a hotel room at 10 minutes past midnight, and it took her 4 minutes to understand what she had just watched. 6 years. 6 years of 3 a.m. phone calls about nothing, of him appearing in cities he had no reason to be in, of a man who had never once, not one single time, asked her for anything at all. He had asked tonight. She had said no, and he had thanked her. She had seen his face when she said it. She had seen exactly what it cost him. He had picked it up and carried it out of the room like it weighed nothing, because he did not want her to have to watch him hold it. Angel got her coat. She found him in the parking level, sitting on the hood of a car in an empty concrete cathedral at 12:40 a.m., and he did not look surprised. 3 rules, she said. Joon-ho got off the car. 1. 6 months. Then we are done, and I go home, and you never call me about it again. 2. This is a job. My company does not touch yours. Your money does not touch mine. And if I catch you paying for anything of mine, I will walk into the sea. She held up a 3rd finger. 3. 3, he said. No romance. No jealousy. Angel looked at him steadily under the parking lights. No falling in love. Something moved behind his eyes, and she could not read it, which had never happened before. Agreed, said Kang Joon-ho. At 8:52 p.m. on Friday, in front of 40 million people, he took her hand and pulled her into the light and said, "This is my wife," and the world came apart, and he leaned in and told her not to fall for him, and she smiled at the cameras and said she wasn't planning to. What the broadcast did not catch was the corridor. They got 20 steps into it before the adrenaline hit her, and Angel turned on him with her hand still shaking and her voice low and murderous. What was that? What was that on the stage in my ear with the whole planet watching? Don't fall for you. Do you think I am one of them? Do you think I am some 16-year-old with your face on her wall? No. Then why say it? Because I needed to say it while I still could. Joon-ho stood in the corridor with the noise of the arena coming through the wall like surf, and for once he did not put the coat on. I watched what love did to you the first time, Angel. I was there. I saw all of it, every day of it. I am not going to be the second one. Angel Johnson opened her mouth and found that there was nothing in it. Behind them, 40 million people were still screaming. The internet did not meet her fresh. That was the thing nobody at Harrow had planned for, because nobody at Harrow had thought of her as a person with a history in Korea. By 9:20 p.m., the first post went up, and it was not "Who is she?" It was 4 words that spread across the country in under an hour. Isn't that the CEO J1 woman? By midnight, there were 2 internets. One of them had decided she was a queen. They cut her boardroom footage to music. They found her TED Talk. They made her cheekbones into a wallpaper and her voice into a ringtone, and they wrote, in 19 languages, that Kang Joon-ho had married an actual adult woman with an actual career, and they were finally free. The other internet went into the archive. They found the clips. 3-year-old news segments. A man in a good suit looking tired and sad and reasonable, saying I only ever wanted to protect her. They cut those to music too. Angel read all of it. She had built the machine that translated it, so she read it in Korean and in English and in Portuguese and in Thai, and she sat on the floor of a rented apartment at 2 a.m. and read a stranger in Busan explain to 60,000 people that she was unstable. And the phrasing was so familiar that for one moment she could not breathe because it was his. It was word for word his. He had put it into the water 3 years ago, and it was still there, and it would always be there, and it would outlive her. Joon-ho found her at 3 a.m. with the phone face down on her knee. He did not ask if she was okay. He never asked if she was okay. He sat down on the floor beside her with his back against the same wall and said nothing at all for 11 minutes. They kept the phrasing, Angel said finally. I know. 3 years. I know. She turned her head. You are supposed to tell me it does not matter. It matters, Joon-ho said. Angel closed her eyes and let her head go back against the wall, and something in her chest came loose that had been welded shut since 9:20 p.m. They moved in on Sunday because the cameras across the street required it. The apartment was his, and it had never been lived in. Angel walked through it once and diagnosed it in 4 seconds. No photographs, no mess. A fridge containing 11 identical bottles of water and a single jar of kimchi his mother had made. You are a hostage, she said. I am a minimalist. You are a hostage with a good decorator. She was in it for 9 days before the war started. It began, as wars do, over the bathroom. Her products colonized the left side of the counter, and then the middle of the counter, and then, on day 6, the windowsill. He said nothing. On day 7, he bought a second shelf and installed it himself at 1 a.m. without mentioning it, and she found it in the morning, already loaded, with her things arranged on it in an order that made no sense to anyone except that it was the order she reached for them in. Angel stood in the bathroom for a while. She started cooking on day 10, mostly out of spite because he ate like a man being punished. The first time she made jollof, the smoke alarm went at 7:40 p.m. and Joon-ho came in at a dead run and found her standing over the pot with a wooden spoon, entirely calm. That is supposed to happen. The alarm. The smoke. The alarm is a bonus. He ate 3 plates. He did not speak for the entire meal, which she was beginning to understand was the highest compliment in his vocabulary, and afterward he washed every dish by hand and put them in the wrong places, and she let him. He put the last plate in the cupboard where the glasses lived, and he did it with such quiet confidence that Angel decided not to say anything about it for at least a year. There is a room, Joon-ho said, drying his hands. There are 11 rooms. It is an obscene apartment. There is a room you have not been in. Angel looked at him. He did not explain. He never explained. He walked down the hall and stopped at a door she had assumed was a cupboard, and he opened it, and he stepped back so she could go first, and Angel Johnson walked into a room the size of her first apartment. It was a closet. It was lit like a gallery. There were rails on 3 walls and shelves on the 4th, and on the rails there were clothes, and the clothes were hers in every sense except that she had never seen them before. Ivory silk, a column of emerald, so deep it looked wet, gold, cut on the bias hanging like water, a black suit with a shoulder on it that could have started a war, shoes underneath in rows in her size, a drawer of jewelry that she opened and then closed again immediately, because there's a level of expensive that is genuinely frightening. She stood in the middle of it for a long moment. Joon-ho, how do you know my size? You wore the green one in Lagos, he said. In the photograph your mother sent. Angel turned around. He was standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, entirely calm, a man who had built a woman a room and considered it roughly equivalent to buying a shelf. My mother sent you a photograph of me. Your mother sends me photographs of you constantly. Your mother has sent me 41 photographs of you. There is one of you at a wedding in 2019 where you are furious about something, and it is the best photograph ever taken of a human being. Which wedding? I do not know. You are wearing purple. You are looking at somebody off camera the way a lawyer looks at a man who has just lied. That was my cousin Toby, Angel said faintly. He had said something about my career. I assumed it was a career thing. She looked back at the rails. There was a coat at the end. Camel, cashmere, the kind of thing that does not have a label because it does not need one, and she reached out and touched the sleeve and found that her hand was not entirely steady. This is too much, she said. It is a closet. Rule 2, Joon-ho. Your money does not touch mine. I did not touch your money. I touched mine. He was already turning away. There is a car at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Wear whatever you want. It is going to be loud. She had never seen him perform. 6 years. She had called this man at 3 a.m. from 4 continents about a queue at an airport and a man in a hat and a sandwich she did not like, and she had never once watched him do the thing that made him the most famous person on earth. It had been deliberate in the beginning. It had felt like the only way to keep him. The car took 40 minutes. The stadium took her breath. They put her in a box, and Angel Johnson, who had presented to sovereign wealth funds, felt her palms go damp, and then the lights went out. 60,000 light sticks came on at once. The whole bowl of the stadium turned into a single organism made of light, and it moved and it breathed, and it made a noise she felt in her sternum before she heard it. The seats were vibrating. She put her hand flat on the rail and felt the entire structure of a building shaking because 60,000 people were screaming one syllable. Then the music started, and Kang Joon-ho walked out onto a stage the length of a street, and Angel did not recognize him. The man from her kitchen was gone. This one was fire. He moved like his body was an argument. He was winning. He hit a note that should not have been possible and held it, and then did something cruel and casual with the end of it, and 8,000 people in the front sections came apart. He owned every inch of it. He was not performing for them. He was letting them watch him be alive, which is a different and much more dangerous thing. And Angel understood in about 4 seconds why a generation of human beings had lost their minds over him. In the row below her box, a girl was on her knees sobbing. Angel leaned toward his manager without taking her eyes off the stage. "Who is that?" she said. The manager laughed. He did not look up from his tablet. That is what the whole world asks. Backstage, the smile went off him like a light switch. Angel came down the corridor and got there just in time to see it happen. He walked off into the wings, and the roar was still going behind him, and his face simply emptied. And it was the most disturbing thing she had ever seen, because it had not been a mask. It had been real on the stage. And now this was real too. He was soaked through. His shirt had gone transparent. There was a woman with a towel, and a woman with water, and a man with a coat, and he took all three without breaking stride. And then he stopped. He bowed to the woman with the towel, then to the woman with the water, then to the man with the coat, then to a sound engineer, then to 2 dancers, then to a security guard, then to a boy who could not have been 19 who was coiling cable and who went scarlet to the ears. He bowed to every single person in that corridor. It took him 4 minutes. Nobody found it remarkable. Then he leaned against the wall and reached up and took the in-ear monitor out of his right ear. There was blood on it. Angel crossed the corridor. She did not remember deciding to. Joon-ho. He looked at the monitor in his hand as though it belonged to somebody else. It happens. There is blood on it. It happens every tour. He wiped it on the towel with the ease of a man who had done it 400 times. The pressure. It is the volume. It is not a thing. How long? Angel. How long has it been happening? Joon-ho considered the question the way he considered every question, which was one of the 4 or 5 things about him that had ruined her. Since I was 19, he said. She did not say anything. It is not glamorous, he said. Nobody puts this part on the poster. No, you are looking at me like I am a dog that got hit by a car. I am looking at you, Angel said, like a person who did not know. He glanced away. Somebody called his name from the far end of the corridor. He held up one finger without looking, and the person stopped calling, and Angel understood that she had just watched a man in his own country hold up one finger and cause silence. Did you like it? Joon-ho said. And he said it fast, and he said it to the floor, and for 1 second the most famous man alive was a boy asking a question he had wanted to ask for 6 years. "You were extraordinary," Angel said. "Okay," he said. He put the coat on. He walked away, and Angel Johnson stood in a corridor with 60,000 people still screaming somewhere above her, and thought, with a great deal of alarm, that she was in significant trouble. The airport was worse. She had seen airports. She had not seen this. There were 4,000 people at Incheon at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they had made signs, and they had been there since the previous evening, and when the doors opened the sound that came off them was a physical force. Security formed around them like a shell. Angel had a moment of pure vertigo, of not knowing which way the exit was, of being a small woman in a crowd of moving bodies with light bursting off every surface, and then a hand closed around hers. She looked down. He did not look at her. He was doing his face, the blank public one, the one that gave nothing. He was walking at a measured pace and nodding once at the crowd and holding her hand so tightly that her rings were digging into her fingers. He was not doing it for the cameras. He was doing it because he had felt her stop. They walked the whole length of that terminal like that, and he did not let go, not once, not at the barrier, not at the gate, not when a photographer got close enough that security had to move. And by the time they were through, Angel's hand was aching, and she did not want him to let go, and she was appalled at herself for it. "You can have your hand back," Joon-ho said. "Thank you." He let go. Then he said, without any inflection whatsoever, "You went very small in the middle of it. When they closed in, you did not go small." "I did not go small." "You went small. It was for about 2 seconds." He was looking straight ahead. "I did not like it. It happened at Gimpo on the way back, and it happened in 11 seconds. There were microphones. There were always microphones. Angel had learned to walk through them the way you walk through rain, and she was doing exactly that when a voice said in Korean, loud pitched to Carrie, "Miss Johnson, do you have a comment on the reports from 3 years ago about your mental health?" Angel kept walking. She had heard worse. She had heard it in 2 languages. Joon-ho stopped. It was so sudden that the entire security formation had to break around him. He stood absolutely still in the middle of a moving airport, and then he turned around and he walked back. He walked back to the microphones. Angel said his name. He did not hear it, or he heard it and did not care. And in 11 years of managed public appearances, Kang Joon-ho had never once walked back to a microphone. He took it out of the man's hand, not roughly. He simply took it the way you take a toy from a child, and he held it, and the corridor went so quiet that you could hear the tannoy in the next terminal. "Ask me again," he said. The reporter had gone gray. "I would like you to ask me again," Joon-ho said pleasantly, "because I have been answering questions in this building since I was 17 years old, and I have never once been asked anything I did not agree to in advance, and today I would like to try it. So ask me about my wife, and then I will answer every question you have ever been afraid to ask me. About my company, about my contract, about the 11 years. He tilted his head. "Would you like that? Because I have a great deal of time and I have nothing at all to lose." Nobody moved. "No," Joon-ho said. He handed the microphone back. He bowed slightly correctly, which was somehow the most violent thing about the entire encounter. And he turned around and offered Angel his arm. She took it because her legs had stopped working. They got 20 steps before she could speak. "You just ended that man's career." "Yes." "Joon-ho, they will crucify you. You cannot do that here. You cannot talk to press like that in this country. You have handlers who exist entirely to—" "Angel." "What?" He said your name and the word fragile in the same sentence. Joon-ho said, in an airport into a microphone, and there were cameras, and it was going to be a headline in 9 minutes. He was still looking straight ahead. His jaw had not moved. "So now the headline is me instead." She stopped walking. He kept going 3 steps and then stopped 2 and stood with his back to her in the middle of an airport and did not turn around. "That is what that was," Angel said. "You did that on purpose." "I have handlers," Joon-ho said, "who exist entirely to make sure the headline is never me. It was a novel experience for all of us. The jet was at 4 a.m. out of Haneda, and she was asleep before the wheels came up. She woke because the light was wrong. She was in a car. She was in the back of a car in Seoul. And the sky outside was the specific blue that only exists at 6 o'clock in the morning. And there was a coat over her. And there was a man beside her reading something on his phone with the brightness all the way down. Angel sat up. We landed. An hour ago. An hour. She looked out of the window. She knew this bridge. She had crossed this bridge. She looked at the clock on the dash, and then at the bridge again, and then at Joon-ho, who did not look up. Have you been driving around Seoul for an hour? There is traffic. There is no traffic. It is 6 a.m. on a Sunday. There is nobody on this road but us and a milk float. Joon-ho turned a page on his phone. You do not sleep, he said. You have not slept properly in 6 years. I have called you at every hour there is, and you have always answered on the first ring, which means you were awake, which means you are always awake. He still did not look up. You were asleep. I was not going to be the one who stopped it. Angel sat in the back of a car with a coat over her and did not say anything at all for the rest of the drive. She taught him to make jollof on a Thursday. It was a catastrophe. He measured things. He measured everything. He stood over the pot with the focus of a man defusing a bomb and asked how many grams of pepper, and Angel put her face in her hands. You do not weigh the pepper. How do I know how much pepper? You look at it. That is not a system. It is the system. Angel, that is not a system, that is a feeling. Yes, she said. Welcome to my country. He burnt the base. He burnt it comprehensively. The alarm went at 9:14 p.m., and by then they were both laughing so hard that neither of them could reach it. And he ate what he had made, all of it, every bite, out of what she was beginning to recognize as pure Korean stubbornness, and he did not complain once. And afterward he wrote the entire method down in a notebook in tiny handwriting like a man taking a deposition. 6 weeks later she came home late, and there was a plate on the counter. It was jollof. It was genuinely terrible. The rice had lost structurally, and there was too much pepper because he had clearly decided to have a feeling about it, and the feeling had been very large. Angel Johnson stood in a kitchen at 11 p.m. and laughed until she had to sit down on the floor. He watched her from the doorway with a tea towel over his shoulder. It is bad, he said. It is so bad. How bad? Joon-ho! It is the worst thing I have ever eaten, and I once ate at an airport in Frankfurt. I had a feeling about the pepper. I can taste the feeling. She ate the whole plate. He watched her do it, leaning in the doorway with the towel on his shoulder, and he did not say anything, and neither did she, and something happened in that kitchen that neither of them acknowledged for a further 11 days. She taught him Yoruba on the plane to Paris. He was a nightmare. He was tonally perfect and semantically hopeless, which meant he could produce a sound with flawless music and no idea what it meant. And on the third morning, he came into the kitchen and said something to her with enormous care and total confidence. Angel put down her cup. What did you just say? Good morning. That was not good morning. That was good morning. I practiced it for 6 days. Joon-ho, Angel said. You just asked me to marry you. He went very still. In Yoruba, she said, properly, formally, you just proposed marriage, in the traditional wording, to your wife, in a kitchen, at 8 o'clock in the morning. There was a silence of approximately 4 seconds. Angel started laughing and could not stop. She laughed until she had to hold the counter. She laughed until she made a sound she had not made since she was 19. And she looked up expecting to find him mortified, expecting the ears, expecting the scarlet. He was looking at her. He was not laughing. He was not embarrassed. He was standing perfectly still in the middle of his kitchen, watching her come apart at his own expense, with an expression on his face that she had never seen there in 6 years, and he did not correct her, and he did not say it wrong on purpose, and he did not say anything at all. Say the real one, then, Angel said, wiping her eyes. Come on. Good morning. No, Joon-ho said. He picked up his coffee and left the room. The rehearsal was 12 hours. She went because he had not asked her to, which she had learned was his way of asking. She stood at the back of a studio in Gangnam and watched 14 people do the same 8 counts 140 times. Nobody sat down. There were no breaks. There was a boy of about 20 who threw up in a bin at hour 7 and came back and got in position, and nobody remarked on it. And there was a woman who had strapped her own ankle with tape and did not mention it to anybody. And in the middle of all of it, there was Kang Joon-ho, 31 years old, the biggest star alive, going again. And again. At hour 9, he took his shoes off to adjust something, and Angel saw the state of his feet and had to look at the ceiling for a moment. At hour 11, the choreographer said the thing was good. Joon-ho said it was not. They went again. 14 people went again at 1 o'clock in the morning because one man said the thing was not good and nobody argued, and Angel understood, finally, completely, that this was not talent. She had thought it was talent. Everybody thinks it is talent. It was a man deciding, every day for 17 years, to spend his own body. He found her at the back at 2 a.m. with a towel around his neck. You stayed. I stayed. It is boring. It was the least boring thing I have ever seen in my life, Angel said, and her voice did something on the last word that she did not authorize. He looked at her for a moment. Come on, he said. There is a convenience store. Here is the thing nobody outside understood about Kang Joon-ho and his wife. They did not hide. Everybody expected them to hide. The industry expected it, the press expected it, and director Baek Sung-min in particular expected it because hiding is what guilty people do, and Baek needed them to be guilty. Instead, they went to dinner. He bought the restaurant. Not the meal. The restaurant. 3 Michelin stars, 40 covers, and Kang Joon-ho took all 40 of them for one night and put one table in the middle of an empty dining room and told the photographers outside exactly what time they were arriving. They arrived at 8 p.m. She was in the Emerald. He was in black, and he did not look at the cameras, and he did not look at the door, and he put his hand on the small of her back and walked her in with the specific, unhurried arrogance of a man who wants the photographs to exist forever. The pictures ran in 11 countries. There was a yacht in Busan, and they were photographed on it. There was a gallery in Cheongdam that closed for an afternoon, so that Angel Johnson could look at 11 paintings in silence, and they were photographed leaving it. There was a jeweler who came to the apartment, and a designer who flew from Milan, and a chef who cooked for 2 people in a house with no photographs on the walls. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, after all of it, they went to a convenience store. Every time, every single time, he would buy the same thing. She would buy something disgusting, and he would look at it and say nothing, and they would sit outside on plastic stools under a strip light like 2 students. And that was the picture that broke the internet in the end. Not Paris. Not the yacht. A photograph taken by a boy on his way home from work of the 2 most photographed people in Asia eating instant noodles on plastic stools at 2 a.m. And she is talking and he is not eating because he is listening to her. 40 million people looked at that photograph and knew something that the 2 people in it had not yet said out loud. Paris was the end of any argument. She wore African couture. It was Lagos, and it was war. It was a structure of gold and deep green with a shoulder like architecture. And she came down the steps of a hotel in the first arrondissement, and the sound the photographers made was not professional. He wore custom. He wore black. He waited at the bottom of the steps. And here is what the cameras caught. And here is what went around the world in 90 minutes and sat at number 1 on every platform on Earth for 9 days. He did not look at the photographers. He looked at her the entire way down. Every step. He watched his wife come down a flight of stairs in Paris with an expression on his face that was so completely undefended, so entirely naked, so far outside the 11 years of managed public appearances that fashion editors who had photographed everybody alive put their cameras down for a second and just watched. There is a frame of it. Everybody has seen the frame. She is 3 steps up. He has his hand out. And Kang Joon-ho, who had never given anybody anything extra, is looking up at her like a man watching the sun come up over a country he had been told he would never see. Rule 3 did not die in Paris. Rule 3 had died some time ago. Paris was simply where the whole planet found out. The necklace happened in Tokyo. The clasp had gone. She was fighting with it in a hotel room in Roppongi with 11 minutes before a car, swearing steadily, and he said, "Come here." And she came over and turned around and lifted her hair. He fixed the clasp in about 3 seconds. Then he did not move. Angel stood with her back to him and her hair in her hand and her eyes on a wall. And he stood behind her with his fingers still on the chain at the back of her neck, and neither of them said anything, and neither of them moved, and the moment went on for so long that it stopped being a moment and became something else. Very lightly, he put the chain flat against her skin. Angel did not breathe. The phone rang. His phone. It was on the bed, and it rang, and it kept ringing, and he took his hand away and picked it up and said yes into it and walked out of the room. And Angel Johnson stood in a hotel in Tokyo with her hair in her fist and had to sit down on the edge of the bed. They did not talk about it. They did not talk about it for a further 19 days. The hoodie happened in Sapporo at a location shoot at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was -9 and she had dressed like a woman from Lagos. He took it off and put it over her shoulders and walked away before she could say anything. She wore it for the rest of the shoot, and she wore it in the van, and she wore it back to the hotel, and she did not give it back. She still has it. It still smells like him. COJ1 started 3 weeks after Paris. It was very good work. It always was. It began with a piece in a business weekly, sourced and sober, about the timing of the Harrow deal. It moved to a photograph of Angel outside a clinic in 2022, which was a dentist, and which was captioned in a way that did not say it was not a dentist. It became a former colleague, unnamed, who was worried about her. It became a thread with 9,000 shares that was written like concern. He did not love her. That was the part people never understood, and the part Angel had stopped trying to explain. He simply could not survive the fact that she was happier without him. By the second month, there were paid photographers on the building. By the third, there was a story in a Korean daily that had 4 facts in it and a shape that was a lie, and Angel Johnson, who had built a company that carried meaning across 40 languages, sat in her own apartment and watched a man reach across 3 years and an ocean and put his hand back on her throat. The night it broke, she locked the bedroom door. She had not done that. Not once, not in 6 years, not in 19 days on the 11th floor. And she did it that night at 11:40 p.m. without saying anything to anybody, and she sat on the floor with her back against the bed and her phone face down beside her, and did not cry because she had learned at 25 that crying is a thing they photograph. She heard him come home at 1 a.m. She heard him stop outside the door. He did not knock. Angel sat on the floor and waited for the knock, and it did not come, and it did not come, and then she heard the sound of a man sitting down on the floor on the other side of a door. "I am here," Joon-ho said. That was all. He did not say it would be fine. He did not tell her to open the door. He did not tell her he had lawyers or a plan or wisdom, because he had never had any of those things and had never once pretended to. He sat on the floor of a corridor at 1 o'clock in the morning with his back against a door and stayed there. Angel Johnson put her hand flat against the wood. She cried then, silently with her hand on the door, in a way she had not permitted herself in 3 years, and she never told him, and he never asked, and he was still sitting there at 6 a.m. when she finally opened it and found him asleep against the frame in yesterday's clothes. The song was on a Tuesday. She had come home at 2 a.m., and there was light under the studio door, which there should not have been, and she pushed it open, and he was at the desk with his back to her and headphones half off. "Play it," Angel said. "No. Play it, Joon-ho. It is not finished. Play the unfinished thing." He sat with his hands on the desk for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched something, and the room filled up. Everybody thought his songs were about girlfriends. That was the industry line, and he had never corrected it. And there were entire forums dedicated to the reconstruction of a romantic history that did not exist. They were not about girlfriends. They had never been about girlfriends. They were about a room with nobody in it. Angel stood in the doorway of a studio at 2 o'clock in the morning and listened to 11 years of a man's actual life. And it was all there, all of it, the van at 14, the ears, the bowing, the 11 identical bottles of water, the total and grinding loneliness of being adored by 40 million people and known by none of them. And then the second verse started and Angel Johnson stopped breathing. Because the second verse was not about a room with nobody in it. The second verse was about a woman who called him at 3 a.m. about nothing. He had not used her name. He never used her name. But it was her voice on the phone, and it was her airport, and it was her man in the queue with the hat, and it was her mother, and it was the sandwich she did not like in Frankfurt in 2021. And it was all there in a song, and it had been there, she realized, with a kind of falling sensation for years. She had been listening to these songs for years. She had been in them for years. The track ended. The room was very quiet. Joon-ho did not turn around. "How long?" Angel said. He did not answer. "Kang Joon-ho, how long have you been writing about me?" He put his hands flat on the desk, and his shoulders came down, and he said it to the console like a man confessing to a crime he had given up hoping to be arrested for. "Since the first album," he said. Director Baek Sung-min made his move on a Wednesday, and he made it in a boardroom, and he had a file. He was not wrong. That was the thing. He had the vote in his pocket and a folder on the table and a small pleasant smile that did not touch his eyes, and he laid it out for 11 people with the calm of a man who has never once been surprised. "The marriage is a commercial arrangement," Beck said. "I have the timeline. I have the parking level footage from the 12th. I have a photograph of them arriving at the hotel 40 minutes apart on the night in question. I have the 6-month figure, which came from her own counsel. This is not a marriage. This is a maneuver, executed by a man who read a clause, and I intend to say so publicly on Friday." He was right about all of it. He was right the way a man is right about a house he burned down years ago and has not been back to see. CEO J1 went on television that night. "Good chair, good jacket, ankle on knee. I wish them every happiness," he said. Genuinely. Angel is a remarkable person. The interviewer said something about the reports. "There were," J1 said. He looked at his hands. He let it sit. "I will not talk about that. She has been through enough. And honestly, I think some of it was my fault. I pushed her too hard. She is brilliant. She is the most brilliant person I have ever worked with." He smiled, sadly beautifully, but she was not ready for this market. "I understood Korea. She understood the vision. That was the arrangement." A pause, perfectly measured. Maybe I let her believe the arrangement was something else. It was so good. It was so beautifully made. Angel watched it standing up in her own living room and could not move, and did not hear the door, and did not know how long he had been in the room behind her. Joon-ho watched the last 90 seconds of it in total silence. Then he picked up his phone and made one call. "Set it up," he said. "Live. Tomorrow. No script, no questions in advance, and no delay." A pause. "I know. Do it anyway." He went on live television at 8 p.m. the following night, and he set fire to his entire life. They gave him 9 minutes. He took 26. He did not defend the marriage. That was what nobody expected, including Beck, including J1, including the 11 people at Harrow who watched it happen with their mouths open in a conference room on the 14th floor. Kang Joon-ho went on live national television, and he attacked. He named CEO J1. He named the segment, the date, the network. He read out from memory in Korean the exact phrasing of a 3-year-old news item, and then he read out the exact phrasing of a post made in Busan 4 months ago by a stranger with 60,000 followers. And he let the country hear that they were identical, word for word, and he asked politely how a stranger in Busan came to have a man's vocabulary in his mouth. He talked about what Fragile does. He explained it slowly to 40 million people, the way you explain a mechanism. He explained that you cannot defend yourself against it. That calm is evidence, and anger is evidence, and silence is evidence. He said her name once at the end. Angel Johnson took 11 weeks of her life and 2 years of her body and got her company back with her own 2 hands in a boardroom in October, Joon-ho said, and there is not one man in this country who helped her do it, including me, especially me. Then he sat back. I have been the most managed human being in this industry for 11 years, he said. I have never said an unapproved sentence in public in my life. So you should probably understand that everything I have just said, I have said, knowing exactly what it costs, and I would like the record to show that I did not consider it for very long. It cost him everything. That is not a figure of speech. 2 endorsement contracts were terminated inside 11 hours. A network canceled a variety appearance. A brand in Paris issued a statement in the special language brands use when they are running. Harrow's stock fell 9%, and Baek Sung-min sat in his office and watched it fall and understood, with genuine bewilderment, that he had lost. Angel found him at 2 a.m. on the roof. He was sitting on the edge of it with his feet hanging over Seoul, and he had a coat on, and he looked entirely calm. "You are finished," Angel said. "Probably. They will not let you back on television in this country." "Probably not." "Joon-ho." Her voice broke on it. "Why?" He looked out at the city for a while. "Because you were on television being called fragile," he said, "and now you are not." Angel Johnson sat down on the edge of a roof beside her husband and put her head on his shoulder, and he went completely rigid, because in 6 years she had never once touched him. Then he moved his arm. He moved his arm and put it around her, and the two of them sat on the edge of a building at 2 o'clock in the morning over a city that had just turned on him, and neither of them said one word for a very long time. He proposed 11 days later. He did it in Gwangwamun at 6 o'clock in the evening, in the middle of a public square, with several thousand people present and every one of them holding a phone. Angel did not know. She had been told there was a dinner. She was in the gold. He stopped walking in the middle of the square. She got 4 steps ahead before she noticed and turned around, and Kang Joon-ho was standing in the middle of Gwangwamun with his hands at his sides, and a woman near them said something and put her hand over her mouth, and then the square went quiet in a wave from the middle outward. "Joon-ho!" He got down on one knee on the stone. Somebody screamed. Several people started to cry. Every phone in that square went up at once, and Angel Johnson stood in front of the most photographed man alive as he knelt on the ground in public, and she could not feel her own hands. "You married me for a clause," Joon-ho said. The square was silent. "You married me for a clause, and I let you, because it was the only way I could think of to be near you, and I am not sorry. I would do it again. I would sign it again tonight." He looked up at her. He had never once in 11 years looked like this in public. "But you deserve to be asked. So I am asking. In front of everybody on the record, with nothing behind it. Not a clause. Not a headline. Not 6 months." He held it up. "Marry me for me." Angel Johnson put both hands over her face in the middle of a public square in Seoul, and 40 million people watched her do it, and she did not care at all. "Yes," she said. "The wedding was in October. It was Lagos and it was Seoul, and it was both in one room. There were Gelly and there were Hanbok. Her mother came in purple and cried in a way she denied for the rest of her life. His mother came in olive and sat very straight and told anybody who would listen that she had known from the first day, which was true. The two women met in the morning and did not need a translator, which nobody has ever explained. It went out live in 41 languages. Angel had not planned that. Her team had done it without asking her, and when she found out 20 minutes before, she stood in a room in a dress and understood what was about to happen and had to be given a moment. She had built chorus so that nobody would go unheard. Her machine carried her own wedding to 211 countries with the tone intact, and there was a woman in Manila and a girl in Lagos and a boy in Sao Paulo who all heard the same vow in their own language at the same second, in the meaning it was said in, and that is what it had been for. That was the whole thing. That was what she had spent 11 weeks of her body on. Director Baek Sung-min arrived at 4 p.m. with the file. He had the timeline. He had the parking level. He had the 6-month figure and the 2 hotel arrivals and the clause and the date and the vote, and every single page of it was true. And he walked into a room in which a woman in gold was laughing at something her mother-in-law had said in a language she had learned from a man who had lied about her. Baek stood in the doorway with a folder in his hand. Nobody stopped him. That was the strange part. Nobody threw him out. Nobody blocked him. Nobody even really looked at him, because there was nothing in that folder that anybody in that room could be made to care about. He had brought proof of a marriage that had ended months ago, Kang Joon-ho saw him. Across a room full of people, in the middle of his own wedding, he saw Baek Sung-min standing in a doorway with 6 years of evidence in his hand, and he did not stop smiling, and he did not go over, and he simply looked at him for 2 seconds, and then turned back to his wife. Baek left. Nobody noticed. They found each other at 11 p.m., out on a balcony, away from all of it. Angel had her shoes in her hand. "I did," she said. Joon-ho did not look over. You told me not to fall for you." Her voice was very steady. "On a stage. In my ear. In front of 40 million people." He went still. "I did," Angel said. "I fell for you." Kang Joon-ho closed his eyes. "I know," he said. "Then why didn't you stop me?" He turned around, finally, and looked at his wife, and there was nothing on his face at all except the truth, which was the one thing he had never been able to say out loud in 11 years and had spent an entire career writing down instead. "Because I broke my own rule first," Joon-ho said. Behind them, through the glass, 2 mothers were arguing about a photograph. Angel Johnson put her hand out. He took it. He did not let go. He never did. "So, right at the beginning, I asked you whether you would have said yes to him. Back then, you did not know what he had already given up. You did not know about the chair or the ears, or the man on the floor outside a door at 1 o'clock in the morning, saying 'I am here' and nothing else. You did not know he had been writing about her since the first album. Now you do. So tell me in the comments, not what you thought at the start, what you think now, and tell me the exact moment he got you. Because everybody has one. Some of you, it was the shelf. Some of you, it was that airport when he walked back to the microphone. Some of you, it was Paris, and the way he watched her come down those stairs. For me, it was the plate of terrible jollof, and I am not taking questions about that. If this one did something to you, subscribe, because I have got another one coming, and it is going to hurt you in a completely different way. I will see you in the next one.